The morning after, the night before. And what a night it was. Daniel Dubois, I mean, it's enough, not enough to just say he beat Anthony Joshua. I mean, he really gave him a beating last night. And this was a fight in which myself, many others, I would say that the overwhelming majority, were picking Anthony Joshua to win this fight by knockout. A lot of people were actually picking Anthony Joshua early by knockout. And Dubois winning, listen, if you had said to even the most staunch Anthony Joshua fan that there's a chance Dubois wins this fight, maybe the proper fanboys, who think Anthony Joshua is, Superman, would say not a chance. But I'm sure even Joshua fans and people like that in the industry, if you said, well, Dubois could win this fight, they'd say, yeah. And I was like that. I was like, oh, yeah, definitely. He can win this fight. He's a big puncher. Biggest puncher Joshua has fought, arguably, since Klitschko. More aggressive than Klitschko. So if you had said, yeah, he'll win this fight, he'll stop Anthony Joshua, I would have said, yeah, fair enough. But if you had said to me he'll win this fight dropping Anthony Joshua four, realistically should have been five times. The second knockdown of round four wasn't called. And he would drop Anthony Joshua four times. He would never come close to losing a round and would face plant Anthony Joshua for the final knockout in the fifth round. I said, hold on a minute. Right? Him winning, yeah, I can see it. But what you just said, let's hold on a minute. Let's be realistic here. But that's what happened. That's what happened. And I think the question now on people's lips is, or people's minds is, where does Anthony Joshua go from here? And to be honest with you, that is a very good question. And it's something that I really don't have an answer for, in a sense of, where does he go from here? You would imagine that the rematch, because Eddie Hearn, once again, has mentioned that there is a rematch in place, a rematch clause, I should say, in place, which apparently Anthony Joshua will trigger. I mean, a lot is said in the immediate aftermath of a fight, especially a fight like this. Emotions are running high. You will say, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to come back, blah, 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 blah. But then when everything settles down, when you watch it, when you reassess, and this isn't like a fight like Fury Usyk, for example, where Tyson Fury had his moments. He got hurt and got a count. And obviously he lost the fight. It was a comprehensive win for Usyk, but enough people saw it as competitive enough that a rematch, yeah, we can do that, we can see. And in the height of everything, you go back, you have a look at it, and you say, okay, yeah, let's do it again. In this scenario, against Ruiz, you knew what you need. You knew what Joshua needed to do to beat Andy Ruiz, and he dropped Ruiz. He made a mistake, and he paid for it. In this fight right here, this wasn't like that. I mean, from round one, and I will likely do a film study of this fight, because the mistakes and the flaws that Joshua made from early on, I mean, it was just, because I've watched this fight back several times, it was just crazy, really. I don't know how you right those wrongs in 6 to 8 months. I don't know how you do it. I really don't. In an immediate rematch with someone like Dubois, who again has, beaten you up really, has hurt you several times. And Joshua, a lot of people said he was gun shy post Ruiz. I don't know what way he's going to be post this fight, so I really don't know. In terms of Anthony Joshua, he had those two fights against Alexander Usyk, and a lot of people did question him. And when he came back against Jermaine Franklin, he obviously had Derek James in the corner. It was a shaky performance. It really was. It was not a performance. Yeah, he won the fight comprehensively, but it was not a vintage Anthony Joshua performance, to say the least. Then August comes. He prepares for Dillian White. The Dillian White fight doesn't happen. We all know why. And then he gets a late notice replacement of Robert Helenius. So, yeah, altogether different. Robert Helenius is a lot taller than Dillian White. It's a different style altogether. So, we needed to see how Joshua would look in there. But you got to remember, Robert Helenius had been knocked out in the first round by Deontay Wilder. Robert Helenius, every time he'd stepped up in his career to even kind of fringe world level, like kind of gatekeeper level, he was found wanting. So, he was knocked out by Gerald Washington in a couple of rounds. So, you looked at this and thought, on paper, this really is a mismatch. And a big highlight reel knockout for Anthony Joshua. It was a brilliant knockout. But there was worrying signs even there. And you looked and you just thought, yikes. I mean, how do we fix this? There's a lot of worrying signs August last year for Anthony Joshua. What do we do? Who are you going to put him in there with? Are you going to change things up? Well, he changes his team. He brings in Ben Davison. A very acrimonious split with Derek James. There was no issues or bad blood at all. He brings in Ben Davison for a fight against Oliver Lean. Now, I originally was thinking Oliver Lean could be a little bit tricky. A southpaw. He is Alexander Usyk if you got him off Wish. So that's one thing you need to take into consideration. But Anthony Joshua handled Oliver Lean with ease. And I saw similarities in the way, in his stance and approach against Oliver Lean, the same he was in there against Dubois last night. And against Oliver Lean was just like a fish out of water. He couldn't do anything. And I thought, okay, that was a really good performance by Anthony Joshua. Maybe we're hitting the sweet spot now. But you gotta take it in context. Yes, Oliver Lean 5 years prior had a good performance against Tyson Fury. But, Tyson Fury against Southpaw's a style thing. Maybe that was just a bit of a false dawn. Because he never looked that remarkable since then. And against Joshua, it was just a complete mismatch. He goes in there against Francis Ngannou in his very next fight. Francis Ngannou is a novice pro. That's what he is. So you expect Anthony Joshua to be comfy in there. He's in Saudi Arabia, which is a place where he's quite used to now. And he goes and does what he needed to do. And from then on, a lot of people were saying, well, this Anthony Joshua beats Alexander Usyk. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, right? Anthony Joshua has beaten a guy in Oliver Lean who, if you put him in there against Bacoli, if you put him in there against Dubois, if you put him in there against, Joseph Parker, I'd pick all those guys over him. Maybe not as dominant as Anthony Joshua was, but I picked them all nonetheless. Maybe just as dominant, who knows, with the case of Bacoli and Zhang. But then he goes and fights Ngannou, and people are making the assumption upon that Ngannou fight that he was ready for it, that this was it, he was back. And I remember at the time saying, look, I like what I'm seeing from Anthony Joshua, I do. And the signs are good. But you need to see him in there against a top 10 heavyweight. And we were not going to see that until maybe September time. At the time I was saying that, I was thinking it would be Hrgovic, to be honest with you. He goes in there now against Dubois, and honestly, it was a strange sight. It wasn't just technically. Anthony Joshua had a lot of issues in there technically. His hands were down low. He's bringing the jab down low. He's very upright. I thought he looked very confident in the build up to this fight, and maybe that was him appearing to look outwardly confident, all the while trying to mask nervous energy, because he seemed extremely nervous in there. This is his first time at Wembley Stadium since 2018. And this is his first stadium fight in the UK in 3 years. It was around about this time 3 years ago he fought Usyk in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And again, he looked nervous in there. From the opening bell, he did not look right. And one thing we've said about Anthony Joshua is that in his career, even though he's going on 35, he'll be 35 next month. Even though he's 35 years old, he's took very good care of himself in and out of the ring. And he's never taken serious punishment, with the exception of the Ruiz fight and the Klitschko fight where he got dropped and hurt. He's never had a really punishing fight. Well, that all changed last night. And I really don't know how at the age of 35 you have the time to come back from that. I really don't. It seems to me as though they're going to be hell-bent on doing the rematch with Anthony Joshua with Daniel Dubois. I don't see how he wins it. I just can't see how you come back from that. I really don't. And I think this is a case of clever matchmaking. And listen, I liked what I seen from Anthony Joshua in those fights. The first two fights with Derek James, he looked jittery as hell. Then he looked good. I liked what I was seeing. I liked the changes that Ben Davison made. And I don't know. Is he comfier in Riyadh, where it's not as lively a crowd? The atmosphere is not as... It's not the same. And some people say... And maybe that's one of the reasons as well. Maybe the atmosphere in the UK is something that Joshua... It affects him mentally. I mean, again, I'm only just thinking outside the box here. because a big 90, well, apparently it was 98,000 in Wembley, all cheering for you. You've got the pressure of Matchroom DAZN, everything on you, and you just fell by the wayside. And in the past, you've been in there against guys that you are significantly better than. They're not as aggressive as Daniel Dubois, and you've been able to get through it. Obviously, with Usyk, you weren't. But when you're in there with someone young, energetic like Dubois, who hits very hard, it just all unraveled. And again, when he's in Saudi Arabia, a much quieter audience, a much smaller capacity, it's different. He seems to have a lot more about. Maybe Joshua is one of these fighters who actually, although he could fill out a stadium like Wembley, he actually produces his better performances when it's a quiet, mellow environment where it's not a full capacity. You know, it's still a lot of people in Saudi Arabia, but it's not 90 odd thousand. And yeah, maybe that's that. In terms of where he goes from here, I'll probably go in a little bit more deeper in a separate video, but I would say after that performance, and I've said this before, but honestly, not about Joshua, but after that performance, I would say, seriously, maybe stick a fork in him. Because how do you come back from that? 34 going on 35. How do you come back from that? I just don't know how you do it. I really don't. Let's wait and see what he does. Let's wait and see the next step that Anthony Joshua's going to go down. I'll probably do a live later and give my full thoughts on it there, have a chat with you guys, but that's going to take some coming back from. Very much so. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button if you could. Subscribe, of course, you haven't already. Peace.